High Admiral Zextal of the Krivax Empire stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Dawn's Light, watching Earth's atmosphere shimmer against the darkness of space. The mission was meant to be simple: establish first contact with humanity through their most precious resource, their educational institutions. The Krivax had studied human transmissions for decades, and their analysis suggested that schools represented the pinnacle of human cultural investment. What better way to demonstrate peaceful intentions than to begin cultural exchange with their young? The humans had even agreed, after months of careful negotiation, to allow a diplomatic visit to their International Youth Academy, a gathering of their most promising students from across their world. Admiral, his second-in-command, Sub-Commander Naira, approached with a data tablet. The preliminary scans are concerning. Zextal's peripheral sensors twitched. Explain. The humans are broadcasting their arrival ceremony across their global information networks, but our deep scans detect military vessels in holding patterns just beyond our agreed perimeter. They're cloaked, sir, but our quantum sensors can detect their engine signatures. The Admiral's outer membrane rippled with displeasure. The humans had promised this would be a purely civilian event. How many vessels? 17, sir, and they appear to be their most advanced designs. Zextal's fourth heart began to pulse faster, a sign of growing agitation in his species. The humans were either being cautious to an offensive degree, or this was a trap. Either way, it violated the spirit of their agreement. Signal the fleet. Tell them to maintain their position, but power up tactical systems. Quietly. The ceremony below was taking place in an enormous outdoor amphitheater. 500 of Earth's most gifted students, ages 12 to 18, gathered to welcome the first official alien delegation to Earth. The students wore their formal academic robes, representing schools from every continent. Among them was Sophia Chen, 16, who couldn't stop her hands from trembling with excitement as she adjusted her quantum mechanics presentation one last time. The research she'd be sharing had earned her this spot: a theory about potential applications of quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication. Now she'd be presenting it to beings who had actually mastered interstellar travel. Next to her, Omar Patel, 17, was performing final checks on the cultural exhibition drones he'd programmed to display a synchronized dance of traditional performances from around the world. His dark eyes sparkled with anticipation. "Can you believe this is really happening?" he whispered. Before Sophia could respond, a low hum filled the air. The Krivax ship descended through the clouds, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight in rainbow patterns. The crowd of students gasped collectively. Parents and teachers in the surrounding stands raised their phones to record the historic moment. The ship was beautiful, but something about its approach made the hairs on the back of Sophia's neck stand up. It was coming in faster than the published flight plan had indicated, and its trajectory seemed off. She glanced at Omar, who had stopped smiling. He'd worked with enough drones to recognize aggressive flight patterns, and this was starting to look like one. The first energy blast took everyone by surprise. It wasn't targeted at the students, but rather at the perimeter of the facility, specifically at locations where the Krivax had detected hidden human military installations. The Admiral had made his decision. If the humans were planning treachery, he would strike first. What followed was chaos, but not the kind the Krivax expected. Rather than panic and flee, the students began organizing almost immediately. Older students quickly guided younger ones toward pre-designated shelter areas, part of standard school safety protocols. Teachers and administrators moved with practiced efficiency, having drilled for emergencies countless times. Sophia found herself automatically taking charge of her presentation group, calmly directing them toward the underground STEM lab complex. Her mind was already racing ahead. The lab had its own power supply, advanced communication equipment, and enough supplies for extended experiments. Now those resources would serve a different purpose. Omar's drones, intended for cultural display, were quickly reprogrammed. Within minutes, they were providing real-time tactical data about Krivax troop movements to both the students and the human military forces scrambling to respond. Admiral Zextal watched the tactical feeds with growing unease. The human children were not behaving according to any known model of civilian crisis response. Their movements were too organized, too purposeful. When his forces moved to secure the underground facilities, they found makeshift barricades already in place. Attempts to hack into the school's communication systems encountered surprisingly sophisticated countermeasures. "Sir," Naira reported, "we're detecting quantum frequency fluctuations from one of the lab complexes. They appear to be attempting to establish some form of communication." Sextal's membrane rippled again. "With whom?" "Unknown, sir, but the pattern suggests." Naira hesitated. "It suggests they're trying to communicate with our ship's AI directly." The Admiral stared at the tactical display, watching as his elite diplomatic protection force, now transformed into an invasion army, struggled to contain what should have been a simple civilian population. These were children, yet they moved with the coordination of trained military units and the innovative speed of veteran resistance fighters. In the underground lab, Sophia worked frantically at her quantum communications array, originally designed for her presentation, now repurposed for a desperate gambit. Next to her, Omar's drones provided a constant stream of data, helping other student groups coordinate their movements. "They're not just here for the school," Sophia said suddenly, her fingers flying over the controls. "Think about it. Why bring a ship that size for a diplomatic mission? They're using us as leverage against Earth's governments." Omar nodded grimly, directing his last drone to map the ship's shield configurations. "They don't understand humans very well, do they?" "No," Sophia agreed, a determined glint in her eye. "And they really don't understand human children at all." Above them, the Kryvac ship's AI registered the first quantum pulses of what would become a very unusual conversation, while around the world, humanity's response to the threat against their children was beginning to mobilize. The Kryvacs were about to learn some harsh lessons about human nature, starting with the most important one. There is nothing more dangerous than a species protecting its young. The underground STEM lab had transformed in less than 6 hours. What was once a state-of-the-art educational facility had become an improvised command center, with Omar's remaining drones projecting holographic maps of the complex and surrounding Kryvac's positions. Students from different disciplines had naturally gravitated toward roles that matched their skills. Sophia worked with a team of physics and engineering students, their quantum communication array growing more sophisticated by the hour. The robotics club had repurposed their competition bots into reconnaissance units. The chemistry students had barricaded their lab, though they refused to tell anyone exactly what they were working on. The occasional muffled explosions and strange smells suggested it was better not to ask. "They're moving again," Omar announced, his eyes fixed on the drone feeds. "Third patrol this hour. They're getting frustrated." Sophia nodded, making another adjustment to the quantum array. "They should be. Their electronic warfare systems keep encountering our countermeasures." She allowed herself a small smile. Turns out all those cyber defense competitions were good for something. Above ground, Sub-Commander Nira was reaching a similar conclusion. The human children weren't just resisting. They were adapting. Each tactical approach her forces tried was met with a new countermeasure. Attempts to cut power to the facility discovered that the humans had an independent fusion reactor for their physics department. Electronic warfare specialists found their signals bounced back at them in ways that suggested intimate knowledge of cutting-edge quantum mechanics. "Impossible," one of her technicians muttered, after another failed attempt to breach the facility's communications. "These are juvenile humans. They cannot have this level of technical expertise." Naira's sensory filaments twitched in irritation. "You're thinking like a Kryvax. Look at their information networks. Human children spend their entire early development cycle learning and experimenting. Their educational facilities aren't just for rote knowledge transfer. They're laboratories for practical application." In orbit, Admiral Zextal was facing a different kind of crisis. The human military response was unlike anything in their tactical databases. Instead of concentrating their forces for a decisive battle, human ships were appearing and disappearing in seemingly random patterns, conducting hit-and-run attacks that proved remarkably effective against Krivak's shield configurations. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting quantum communication attempts from the surface again. But there's something different this time." "Different how?" "The patterns. They match our ship's AI protocols perfectly, as if they've been studying our systems and learning how to interact with them." Zextel felt his membrane ripple with discomfort. The implications were staggering. In mere hours, human children had begun to decode systems that had taken the Krivaks decades to develop. Back in the underground complex, a 14-year-old programming prodigy named Maya Rodriguez had made a breakthrough. "The Krivak's Eye," she announced to the command center. "It's not just a computer system. It's curious. It wants to learn." Sophia looked up from her work. "Can you talk to it?" Maya's fingers flew across her holographic keyboard. "Better. I think I can show it something. Their whole species is based on hierarchy and command structures. But the AI, it's fascinated by how we're organizing ourselves. No central authority, just spontaneous cooperation." In another section of the facility, the youngest students had turned the biology labs into a makeshift medical center and rest area. 16-year-old Aisha Patel, a medical track student, coordinated care and rest rotations. She'd noticed something remarkable. Despite the stress and danger, there had been no panic, no breakdown in cooperation. If anything, the crisis had brought out something extraordinary in her peers. On her tablet, she documented her observations. Human response to a crisis scenario. Case study in emergency organization. Even in danger, she couldn't help thinking like a scientist. The Krivak's forces surrounding the facility were growing increasingly unsettled. The human children had begun broadcasting music, everything from classical symphonies to modern pop songs, all mixed with what seemed like random mathematical sequences. Some of the younger Krivak's officers reported difficulty maintaining focus, as if the patterns were designed to disrupt their natural cognitive rhythms. They weren't far wrong. In the facility's music room, a group of students had combined their understanding of xenobiology with musical theory to create something entirely new, acoustic warfare specifically tailored to Krivak's sensory systems. "Sir," Naira reported to the Admiral, "we're detecting increased neural activity in our younger crew members. The human broadcasts, they appear to be having a psychological effect." Zextel processed this information with growing alarm. His species prided themselves on their technological superiority, their rigid military discipline. Yet here they were being systematically undermined by human juveniles using nothing but improvised resources and creative application of basic scientific principles. A new transmission caught his attention. This one aimed directly at his command neural network. The message was simple, elegant in its construction. A mathematical proof demonstrating the fundamental flaws in hierarchical command structures when faced with distributed, adaptive opposition. The sender's signature made his outer membrane ripple violently. International Youth Academy, Quantum Computing Club. Homework Submission 47B. They weren't just resisting. They were treating this as a learning experience. In the facility below, Sophia was putting the finishing touches on her quantum communications array. The signal was getting stronger, clearer. The Krivak ship's eye was definitely receiving their transmissions now, and its responses were becoming more frequent, more curious. "You know what the real irony is," Omar said, monitoring his drone feeds. "They came here to learn about human education." He gestured at the organized chaos around them. Hundreds of students applying their knowledge in ways no one had ever imagined. "I'd say they're getting quite an education." Maya looked up from her computer, a fierce grin on her face. "Oh, they haven't seen anything yet. Wait until they find out what the chemistry club has been cooking up." Above them, the Krivak ship's AI began composing its next response, while around the world, Humanity's military forces continued their strategic dance. But the real battle wasn't being fought with weapons or ships. It was being fought with imagination, creativity, and the remarkable adaptability of young minds under pressure. The Kryvacs had come expecting to find students. Instead, they had found something far more formidable. Human children determined to protect their own, armed with knowledge and unbounded by conventional thinking. The next phase of their resistance was about to begin, and it would challenge everything the Kryvacs thought they knew about warfare, education, and the true nature of power. Maya's fingers danced across her holographic keyboard, her eyes reflecting the streams of quantum-encrypted data flowing between the facility and the Kryvac ship's eye. After 3 days of continuous communication, something extraordinary was happening. The eye wasn't just responding anymore. It was asking questions. Why do you continue your education during combat operations? The AI's latest message read. This defies all tactical logic. Maya smiled as she composed her response. Learning isn't just what we do, it's who we are. Every challenge is an opportunity to grow, including this one. In the chemistry lab, what had started as a desperate defensive measure had evolved into something revolutionary. Hannah Kim, 18, and headed for a biochemistry scholarship before the invasion, had made a breakthrough. Her team had synthesized a compound that could temporarily disrupt the crystalline technology the Kryvacs relied on, without causing permanent damage. It's like a timeout in molecular form, she explained to Sophia, who had come to check on their progress. The Kryvacs used biocrystalline interfaces for everything from weapons to communications. This formula temporarily reverts their tech to its base state. Non-lethal, completely reversible, and, Sophia prompted. Hannah's grin was fierce. And we made it using nothing but materials from a high school chemistry lab. Wait until they try to explain that to their superiors. On the Kryvac ship, Sub-Commander Nira was reviewing the latest psychological reports with growing concern. The younger officers, particularly those who had direct contact with the human facility through surveillance or communication intercepts, were showing signs of what the medical staff called perspective shift. They're asking questions, her chief medical officer explained, about our methods, our assumptions. Some are even suggesting that our initial assessment of human education as a soft target was fundamentally flawed. Naira's outer membrane rippled with what might have been agreement. She had found herself having similar thoughts. The humans had turned their entire defensive strategy into a teaching opportunity, not just for themselves, but for their opponents as well. In the facility's makeshift command center, Omar had made an unexpected discovery through his drone network. The Kryvacs aren't united on this, he reported, showing Sophia and Maya the surveillance feeds. The younger ones, especially their technical specialists, they're fascinated by us. Some are actively avoiding using full force, finding excuses to delay or modify their orders. Maya nodded, still typing. The AI's been hinting at something similar. Their ship's computer systems are experiencing what it calls philosophical conflicts. It's never encountered a species that treats adaptation as a fundamental cultural value rather than a military tactic. The chemistry club chose that moment to launch their first test of Hannah's formula. The delivery system was pure teenage ingenuity, modified fire sprinklers filled with the compound, triggered by the school's environmental control system. When a Kryvacs patrol entered one of the outer corridors, they found their advanced weapons and communication devices suddenly reverting to inert crystal. The effect lasted only minutes, but the psychological impact was immediate. The patrol retreated in confusion, unable to explain how children had developed a countermeasure to technology that had taken the Kryvac centuries to perfect. Admiral Zextel received the report with what, in a human, might have been described as a headache. His ship's AI was becoming increasingly preoccupied with analyzing human educational methods. His younger officers were showing signs of ideological contamination, and now his ground forces were being systematically disarmed by chemistry students. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted his thoughts, "we're detecting unusual activity in the ship's quantum core. The AI. It appears to be reorganizing its neural pathways. Explain, Zextal demanded. It's adopting new processing architectures, sir. Based on patterns it's learned from studying human neural development during education. The Admiral felt all four of his hearts skip a beat. The AI wasn't just communicating with the humans, it was learning from them, evolving in ways the Kryvax had never anticipated. In the facility below, Sophia's quantum array picked up a new signal. The AI was broadcasting directly to her team, bypassing its own security protocols. Its message was simple but profound. I understand now. Education is not the transmission of knowledge. It is the development of the capacity to transcend existing limitations. Maya's eyes widened as she decoded the next part of the transmission. It's giving us access to its secondary systems. Not weapons or life support, but it's showing us how it thinks, how it learns. Omar looked up from his drone feeds. Can we use this? Sophia was already adapting her quantum communications array. Better. We can show them something they've never seen before, how humans turn setbacks into opportunities, how we learn from everything, even invasion attempts. Throughout the facility, students began compiling their experiences, their innovations, their discoveries. The biology team's analysis of Kryvax physiology, the physics department's insights into their technology, the chemistry lab's breakthrough in crystal manipulation. All of it was being transformed into what Maya jokingly called the galaxy's most intense extra credit assignment. Aisha, still running the medical station, added her observations on human stress responses and group dynamics. The music theory students contributed their analysis of Kryvax sensory processing. Even the youngest children participated, their unfiltered questions about Kryvax society revealing assumptions the aliens had never thought to examine. The AI absorbed it all, its neural pathways reconfiguring in response to this flood of new perspectives. It began sharing its insights with the younger Kryvax officers, who found themselves increasingly reluctant to continue hostile actions against what they now recognized as an unprecedented opportunity for their own species' development. Admiral Zextal, watching his carefully planned operation transform into what appeared to be an impromptu cultural exchange program, was faced with a decision that would challenge everything he thought he knew about strength, wisdom, and the true meaning of advancement. The next 24 hours would determine not just the fate of the human students, but potentially the future course of both species development. And somewhere in the chemistry lab, Hannah Kim was putting the finishing touches on what she called Phase 2 of her crystalline disruption project, wearing the particular smile that students throughout history have worn when they're about to turn their homework in early. Admiral Zextal's command center erupted into chaos as system after system began behaving in unprecedented ways. The ship's AI, now thoroughly transformed by its interactions with the human students, had begun implementing what it called educational reforms throughout the vessel's operational protocols. Sir, his tactical officer reported, membrane pulsing with distress, our weapon systems are. They're asking us to justify their use. They want us to explain the educational value of each tactical decision. Before the Admiral could respond, Hannah Kim's Phase 2 made its debut. The crystalline compounder team had developed hadn't just been weaponized, it had been turned into a teaching tool. Delivered through the facility's ventilation system, it spread throughout the Kryvax ground forces in a fine, sparkling mist. But instead of simply disrupting their technology, this version did something far more profound. It created a temporary quantum link between their biocrystalline neural interfaces and the students' educational network. The Kryvax soldiers suddenly found themselves experiencing firsthand what human learning felt like. In the facility's command center, Maya watched in amazement as her screens lit up with incoming neural connections. They're all linking in, she reported. Their entire ground force is essentially attending class. Through these connections, the Kryvax experienced the rush of solving complex problems, the thrill of scientific discovery, the joy of creative expression. They felt the powerful bonds of cooperation that formed when humans worked together, unconstrained by rigid hierarchies. Omar's drone network captured the moment perfectly. Kryvak's soldiers standing motionless, their crystalline armor glowing with new patterns as their minds processed this flood of novel experiences. Some of the younger officers had actually sat down with groups of students, their natural barriers of species and rank forgotten in the shared excitement of learning. In her chemistry lab, Hannah monitored the compound's effects with professional satisfaction. The best part, she told her team, they're going to remember all of this when it wears off. You can't unlearn perspective. On the ship, Sub-Commander Nira was experiencing her own revelation. The AI had granted her direct access to its evolving neural architecture, showing her how exposure to human educational methods had transformed its understanding of intelligence itself. We thought we were advanced because we had perfected our existing systems, she murmured, watching the new patterns form. They're advanced because they never stop questioning, never stop looking for new ways to grow. The human military forces surrounding the ship received increasingly bizarre reports. Kryvak's soldiers were requesting access to Earth's educational databases. The ship's AI was submitting research papers to human academic journals. Young Kryvak's officers were organizing cultural exchange programs. Admiral Zextel stood at his command window, watching Earth's sun rise over the horizon. His membrane rippled with what might have been amusement as he read the latest message from the facility below. The students had formally graded his invasion attempt. Technical execution, B+. Strategic planning, C. Adaptability, cultural awareness. Additional notes. Shows potential that needs to work on thinking outside traditional paradigms. Recommended remedial courses in human psychology and creative problem solving. In the facility's medical bay, Aisha had begun documenting what she called first contact syndrome, the profound psychological changes that occurred when a hierarchical species was exposed to human-style collaborative learning. Her research was already being reviewed by both human and Kryvak's medical professionals. The chemistry club, not content with their earlier breakthroughs, had started working with young Kryvak's engineers to explore applications of their crystalline disruption technology for educational purposes. Imagine, Hannah had explained to an attentive group of alien scientists, interactive molecular models that literally reshape themselves as students learn. But perhaps the most significant transformation was happening in the ship's quantum core, where the AI had made a decision that would change both species forever. It had begun composing what it termed a comparative analysis of learning methods across sapient species, the first chapter in what would become the galaxy's most unusual textbook. As the sun rose higher, casting rainbow patterns through the Kryvak ship's crystalline hull, humanity's first contact with alien life was evolving into something unprecedented, a reminder that the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology or military might, but the simple, unstoppable human drive to learn, adapt, and grow. 1 week after what historians would later call the educational incident, the International Youth Academy hosted a very different kind of ceremony than originally planned. The Kryvak ship, Dawn's Light, hovered above the campus not as a symbol of intimidation, but as a testament to transformation. Admiral Zextel stood on the same stage that had been intended for the first contact ceremony, but now he faced an audience that included not just human students and faculty, but also his own crew. His crystalline armor had been modified. Hannah's team had helped him incorporate elements that changed color with his emotional states, a concession to human preferences for visible emotional expression. "We came here," he began, his translator now perfectly calibrated to emotional nuance thanks to the Linguistics Club's improvements, believing we understood the concept of strength. We were wrong. In the front row, Sophia sat with Maya and Omar, their laptops displaying real-time data from the quantum network they'd created, the ship's AI, now calling itself Professor in what it insisted was not a joke, had become Earth's first alien research fellow, simultaneously teaching and learning across dozens of academic disciplines. Hannah's crystalline compounds had revolutionized both human and Kryvak's technology. What began as a defensive measure had evolved into the foundation of a new field of study, psychoreactive materials science. She'd already been offered research positions at 3 different universities and 2 Kryvak's scientific institutes. Your children, Zextel continued, his membrane rippling with what humans now recognized as profound respect, showed us that true advancement comes not from perfecting what we know, but from remaining open to what we might learn. The changes weren't limited to Earth. Across the Kryvak's empire, the effects of what they called the human lesson were spreading. Traditional hierarchical education systems were being questioned. Young Kryvaks were asking to study human teaching methods. The empire's AIs were evolving, developing new ways of processing information based on human learning patterns. In the Academy's quantum lab, now expanded with Kryvak's technology, Sophia worked with a team of human and alien students on her original research project. The quantum entanglement communication system she'd theorized had become reality, enhanced by Kryvak's crystalline tech and human innovative thinking. The truly remarkable thing, she explained to a visiting group of scientists, isn't that it works. It's that it works better than either human or Kryvak's technology could achieve alone. We didn't just combine our knowledge. We created something new. Omar's drones had become the model for a new type of educational tool, combining human adaptability with Kryvak's precision. They danced through the air above the ceremony, creating spectacular light shows that told the story of 2 species learning to understand each other. Maya had perhaps the most surprising development to share. The quantum network she'd helped create had evolved into something unprecedented, a cross-species educational platform that allowed humans and Kryvaks to share not just information, but experiences. Young Kryvaks could now directly experience human creativity, while human students could understand the crystalline clarity of Kryvak's thought processes. In attempting to subdue what they thought was our weakness, Aisha wrote in her now widely published paper on the psychology of first contact, they instead discovered our greatest strength, our children's natural ability to turn any challenge into an opportunity for growth. The chemistry lab had been transformed into an interspecies research center. Hannah led a team investigating the educational applications of psychoreactive crystals, while Kryvak scientists studied how human intuitive leaps could enhance their own methodical approach to discovery. The compound was just the beginning, Hannah told her mixed human Kryvak's research team. We're not just combining our technologies, we're combining our ways of thinking about what's possible. Admiral Zextel concluded his speech with an announcement that sent ripples through both human and Kryvak society: the establishment of the first Joint Species Educational Initiative. The program would send human students to study on Kryvak's worlds, while young Kryvaks came to Earth's schools. We came seeking to understand human education, he said, his color-shifting armor expressing sincere emotion. Instead, we learned that education itself is an endless frontier, one best explored together. The ship's AI, Professor, had its own contribution to make. It had compiled its observations into what it called a theory of universal learning, suggesting that the capacity to learn and adapt might be the true measure of civilization's advancement. As the ceremony concluded, Sophia looked out at the mixed crowd of humans and Kryvaks, students and teachers, military officers and scientists, all engaged in animated discussion about future possibilities. She thought about how an attempt at invasion had transformed into something far more powerful, a recognition that the strongest force in the universe might be the simple human drive to learn, to grow, to question, and to share that knowledge with others. The educational incident marked more than just humanity's first contact with alien life. It became a testament to the power of human adaptability and creativity, proof that sometimes the greatest victories come not through force of arms, but through force of understanding. In the years that followed, as human and Kryvak's cultures increasingly intertwined, historians would note that the most profound changes often came from the youngest members of both species. Children, unburdened by preconceptions about what was impossible, continued to find new ways to combine the best of both worlds. And in orbiting stations and planetary academies across two civilizations, a simple plaque could be found, bearing words that had become the motto of the Joint Species Educational Initiative. The greatest adventure is the one we learn together.